Welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast. We are so glad that you would join us today as we are looking to do all we can to encourage and cheer on and stimulate multiplication within the Australian church. And today we are joined by those who are right on the front lines, right on the coalface, those who are in a season of discerning God's will to plant a church and the courage that is required in that. And today we are joined by Trent and Sarah Young, who find themselves in Coffs Harbour. We're going to hear a lot more of their story of what brought them to Coffs Harbour. But guys, I'm so glad that you would be able to join us today and kind of share with our listeners.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having us, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
We really appreciate it and honoured to be a part of it and just share our journey.
Absolutely. We can't wait to hear more of that. Well, maybe just to start, and we'll get to the kind of, nuances of where you are right now and what has led you to where you are, but maybe just give us a bit of a backdrop as to your life, your family, where your ministry experiences have been, and then I'll ask you some particular questions about where you guys are now.
Yeah,
sounds good.
For sure. So we've been married 20 years this year.
Yeah.
So I know I don't look old enough for that, but we've been married 20 years, got two boys, Charlie and Oliver, they're 14 and 11. And so they're very much on this journey with us and where we're at now. But for me, at least, grew up in a Christian home, just always have loved serving God in whatever capacity that was. That was often practically and technical type things, but just love serving in the church. And just over a period of time became a part of the Acts Global movement, which we're a part of. And 2004 we're involved in a church plant team, and so have sort of experienced some of that down on the surf coast in Torquay in Victoria, and so a part of that for 4 or 5 years, and then ended up leading that church, which was unexpected, just to be able to. We were saying, God, hey, use us, and in short, we ended up leading that church for 5 years, and I guess I was running a business, and Sarah was working as well, and we just said, oh, well, this is our life, this is what we're doing, but I think deep down there was a call of full-time ministry, or just God's drawing and stirrings continuously in that, and even stepping into that role was sort of like, hey, God had been speaking, but then moving into that was unexpected to some extent. And then just more recently, we've been on staff at Resound Church in Melbourne. We've been there for 6.5 years, and executive pastors there and leading a location and just working with the church and the senior pastors. And so that's a really quick version. I don't know what you want to add. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a born and bred a Geelong girl, so got the privilege to serve in the church I was saved in, actually, as just a child. And so, did youth leadership for a while before we got married. And then, as Trent said, moved to Torquay and then Melbourne, and now we find ourselves in Coffs Harbour.
Wow. And so both of you also hold roles within your national movement as well, Acts Global. Tell us more a little bit about that. I'm really excited from an outsider's perspective to see what's happening with Acts Global at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. For us in our lives, we often have held multiple hats. And so that's the same with the denomination. So I've got a number of roles. I'm on the board of the denomination. So we're one legal company, which is a bit different to some movements. So I've got a role, I guess, administratively and corporately there. I'm on our national eldership, which is, that spiritual governance group made up of about 25 people from across the country and have input into the movement. And then day to day, I'm employed to work with churches on property and projects and, the church expansions and all that sort of thing. And also do child protection as well. So a few different hats that we put on. And I guess for us, Sarah can share about what she does, but, we're just invested in the movement and we love the people and we love what it's about. And it's more than just a role or a job or a place for us to fulfill a calling. It's actually just we're bought into what the movement's about.
Yeah. And so as part of the National Administration Office, we help, I guess, support churches, local churches in their compliance and what they need to do. And so I get to help churches do that in a range of ways, as finance and, just helping them with questions and resourcing them. And, our social media for the movement, I get to play a little bit of a part in that and help with some of our events that we run as well. So it's very varied, which is the way we love it.
Bits and pieces.
All the time. But we just love that we just get to serve alongside others and, champion what they're doing in their locations, but come alongside them and help them as well as they do what it is that God's called them to do.
Wow. So good, guys. And so, hearing some of your backstory, where you are today, obviously, if our listeners haven't picked up, you've relocated from Melbourne to Coffs Harbour recently. And what I wanted to ask you guys about next is that you guys are very much in, I guess, that gestation period of planting a church. And as you and I have connected offline, that kind of sense of the call of God upon your lives to do something that's out of where, your ordinary or where you had come from. And for me, as a fellow church planter, obviously also working with Exponential, there's just something I love in looking into the eyes of other church planters and going, tell me, what did God do in your heart? What did that look like? What was that almost deer in the headlights type moment of like where you just knew that God had, in a sense, arrested you for this kind of adventure that you guys are on? I really want to dive into the call today. And so maybe you guys could tell us a bit of your story about how that happened, what then proceeded from that, and where you guys find yourself right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess in overall, it caught us by surprise in some respects. As we mentioned before, always wanted to serve God, and we'd moved into that full-time sort of capacity. And while there was different roles and responsibilities, we were in full-time ministry, and it's like the church that we were a part of in Melbourne, we loved it. We loved where we lived. We saw ourselves there forever. We even joke that when we moved from the coast to Melbourne, that we threw away our moving boxes because we were there forever.
We found our home, and we'd found our church family, and that was it, unless God said otherwise.
And we've always said that, unless God said, and it was kind of like the tagline on the end that you meant to say, maybe, or something. But we were there, like we were invested. We loved it. We loved the people, and even our gift mix around strategy and vision and organization, and it's kind of how we're wired. There was a good outlet for those things, and we saw success, and we loved where we were. And then it would have been April 2021, thereabouts, I particularly started to feel unsettled and just this stirring and to be honest, even some anxiety type stuff about, well, what's going on? It was really unusual because I'm not like that at all. Most stressful situations and things, I'm just like, oh, whatever, we'll work through it. It'll be okay. And started to wonder, was it just a post-COVID thing? Being in Melbourne, it was like, oh, maybe COVID just that whole season in church leadership was full on. But just unpacking that was like, well, hang on. For us, it was a challenging time. It was a great time around innovation and ability for the church to come alive and caring for one another and discipleship and all that sort of thing. So it was in some ways really exciting. And so we just started to talk, and being vulnerable and honest with you today, Charlie. And everything. It's like I eventually told Sarah how I was feeling.
I already knew because I've, been married nearly 20 years. You pick up on some stuff, but just gave Trent some space to try and work out and articulate exactly what was going on in his life.
And it was like, hey, what's going on? And so we just started to talk about it, and then unpack that with people in our lives that speak into our life, both our senior pastors, and just journeying that, and then also other people that have mentored us, and just trying to go, hey, am I messed up and I missed it all, or actually is God doing something, and what does this mean? And it came unexpectedly.
Yeah, I guess it was about discerning really the season that we were in, and there was this stirring and unsettledness, but we just knew that God was in it too. And so leaning on those trusted people in our lives that are just great people of integrity and character, but knew us enough to be able to help us discern too was really important. And so eventually, I guess that whole process led us to a position where we really felt like we were called to be the senior leaders of a church again, and then took us on a whole adventure of exploring, what could that look like? What is God saying in that? And, a huge shout out to our senior pastors, Wayne and Ruth, the way that they helped us to journey through that season, because without their love and support and the way that they were just open to hearing what God was saying through that whole season actually helped set us up for where we are today too. And so it was just about, if we're going to be senior leaders, what does that look like? Does that mean taking on a church that may be already established, that may need to be revived? Or is it about, doing something fresh and new? And I think I speak for both of us that, when we threw around church planting to start with, it was like, nah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, well, and we journeyed this with our national leadership team, who in our movement appoint the senior leaders of churches, and for us and them, the whole thing was we've got to get God's handle on it. We've got to get God's voice on it, and we don't. And look, for us, we've been around long enough to go, hey, we don't want to just drive something ourselves. If God's not in it, we don't want it, and otherwise we'll end up in a place that's going to burn us out and not where we're in our sweet spot and graced for.
Yeah.
And so we just journeyed them. But I remember one meeting, we're like, they asked us, would you church plant? And I was like, no. And so, but, and even we can probably elaborate in some of this discussion, Charlie, is just, I think probably the mindset of church planting in our eyes, or even this preconceived idea, is it looks a certain way. And then as we've gone on this journey, it's like, well, it's not the way that you see on Instagram, everyone doing it.
Yeah.
It's not how maybe you've read something. It's not how this person said this model has to be. Actually, it's all of. And, so there's no right and wrong. And obviously you want to know that you're, God's designed you to be there, and that you've got those giftings, and you want to be wise about it. But for us, I think that, in my response was almost, okay, I dismissed that because I kind of had a thought already of what church planting was, and particularly, well, where would we go? And, who would be our team? And, well, you have to have a team if you do church planting. And we've discovered that, well, we're in it and we don't. And so we can talk about that. So, why don't you share about when we were talking around our table?
Yeah, so we're sitting around our table, and I guess really just I guess it sparked something in us when we started thinking about, okay, well, God, what is it that you've called us to do? What is it that we really feel drawn to fulfilling what it is that God had asked us to do? And so church planting actually fit around that. And so we were sitting on our back deck having coffee one morning, and I said to Trent, hey, what if we did church plant? And what if we went to Coffs Harbour? And Trent was like, that's interesting, because I can't get Coffs Harbour off my heart either. And I guess to backtrack why Coffs Harbour, all I can say is that I was looking at a map of Australia at one stage, and I was just going up the East Coast and just looking at different things and different places, and I guess almost dreaming a little bit, okay, God, well, what could that look like? And I just kept coming back to Coffs Harbour. We'd never visited. We don't know anyone. We didn't know anyone here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like we had ties and connections here, but I just couldn't stop, and we couldn't stop.
Yeah. And I think part of the thought with church planting was we had thoughts around how the church should be, and how we would love a foundation of the church to be. And I think COVID and that whole season has disrupted the church in a good way, I reckon. And so for us, it's like, well, hey, and even just journeying with some others and mentors, it's like, hey, if you went in and were leaders of another church and repurposed a church, and you're going to have to work on all these foundations, and they're good, but what does that look like for you? And so for us, it's like, hey, we're passionate about discipleship and how people can have a sense of personal evangelism and speaking to ourselves as well. Like, how do we don't just want to be about a gathering, which we love.
Yeah.
So all of these things were stirring in us, like, okay, well, actually, maybe we can start culture from the beginning. We can shape culture and foundation and spiritual formation for the church from scratch. It's not like, hey, we're trying to undo things that might already be there. And so that was probably the drawing. So then, Coffs Harbour. And so we were like, well, if there's something in this, because we both had this thought and we know enough about each other to go, well, hey, there's something, God's got something in there. So we flagged it with our, I guess, those mentors and people, and they were real positive about it. And so like, hey, let's go. We probably should go and visit. So the quick version is we booked a flight. We went up for a weekend in April. We bought a house on the second day that we were there. And that's a whole nother story. God just, the provision through this whole, and confirmations, it's been a massive faith journey. But just those confirmations. And so we, on that weekend with our boys as well, because we've really brought them on the faith journey of, we want them to have this as their story as well.
And the calling's not just about Trent and I, it's about us as a family. God doesn't separate us as family. And it may look different depending on the age of your family, but they're part of the process just as much as we are. So
so we decided that weekend that this is where we're meant to be, and then had to work out all the detail, but just really holding things lightly. And we just saw confirmation after confirmation, and those continue on a weekly basis. And we're having more random conversations and meals and coffees with people that we've met than I could ever possibly imagine. So that's sort of a broad overview of where we're at.
A couple of things in there that I just wanted to kind of highlight, because I think they're really important parts of the church planting journey and conversation. And the first one that you highlighted there, Trent, was even that sense of anguish that you were experiencing. And I think sometimes we associate that to be quite a negative thing, but sometimes the Lord is in that, and he's trying to, you've used the word a couple of times, stirrings, like stir us towards something. And even just would want to encourage any listeners that may be listening today, that if you're in a place like that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe that's an encouragement to take the space to ask, Lord, what are you up to here? The other thing that, and again, we've spoken about this offline, I just really wanted to highlight that sometimes we bring out the highlight reel of church planting. And the reason why I have intentionally invited you guys to be part of our podcast today is because you guys are in it right now. Like, there's no sense in which you necessarily know what this is going to look like or the outcome. And that is part of the adventure of planting a church, of trusting that what God has prompted you towards is gonna be in his plans and purposes and outcomes. But actually, to encourage any potential listeners today that actually live stories are happening right now, and maybe there's one that's unfolding in your life. And I guess that leads me to my next question, guys, is particularly around, like, you guys have highlighted some pretty significant, roller coaster that you've been through over the last couple of months, like the kind of anxiety of, oh God, are we doing this, to buying a house on the second day of being in a new town, to the adventure and the confidence that you also have. And when it comes to church planting, that can often change day by day, depending upon the circumstances. Like, one day you're deeply insecure about, oh my goodness, God, are we in your plans and purposes right now? And the next day you feel like, oh God, I can absolutely sense that you are at work. I wonder if you guys just a little bit would reflect upon that tension and just that kind of sense of having both of those feelings, even ruminating around yourself, even all on the same day, and just how you guys have kind of been able to walk with that.
Yeah, sometimes I think it can even be minute by minute, Charlie. You'll go, oh yeah, it's all right, God's in this, and then you're like, hang on a second, what? I think it's a very real tension, one that we encounter all the time.
Yeah.
And even in our discussions with each other, you know, it's, you know that you're called, and part of the important process for me particularly has been to actually journal some of the things that God has done, because there's moments I have to go back to those writings to go, God, are you even in this? And I go, yes, because you did this and this and this and this. And so it's important to have those things to be able to go back to, you know. When God calls us, often he gives us only a little snippet of that call. And I think it's really important for us as a people in our lives to lean in and go on an exploration journey sometimes, even when we haven't got it all worked out. And so there are times that we're like, yes, God, you've called us, you've done this is amazing. And other times we're like, I remember, you know, a time Trent was in Melbourne for a segment of time when I'd moved up here with the boys, and I just remember sitting on my couch going, I am here and I'm all alone and I don't know anyone. And just in that moment going, God, have you really called us here? You know, and just trying to process the reality of that, you know. It is definitely a tension, and one that I have to keep coming back to the Holy Spirit and going, God, what is it that you've asked us to do? How can I see, you know, that outworked in today, you know, those conversations that might come up, celebrating the you know, faith conversation I got to have with a girl I met through an appointment that was totally unrelated to faith. You know, they are the moments that you have to hang on to in the call of God when the rubber hits the road, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's a massive tension. I think, you know, for us in our journey, we've taken faith steps before, significant ones, but often for us in the past, it's been like two things on the table where God's saying, okay, here's this and here's that. You sort of choose, and one takes us journey of faith. This was quite different, where we had to step back from what we were in and go, because for our journey in Melbourne where we were, we actually said to our church, we said to our team, hey, we're leaving. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know where we're going. So we almost stepped out of, and then God revealed. And I think that order was significant. But the tension in that, it's definitely a daily thing, and it's good for your faith, but it's hard for your faith. Hard for you, depending on how you're wired, hard for your emotional life. But know that God's speaking to you through it. So for me, like Sarah, have tried to write down those stories of moments to remember back on. And at the moment, I'm remembering them often. But I'll get out and walking and just praying and going, God, where are we in this? And particularly just trying to shift external mindsets, or like I touched on before, hey, even the highlight reel you see of other church planners. Just go, God, hey, you've called us to here, and daily reminding ourselves of that, of what that would look like. You know, for us, we've been fortunate that we've had some space, like we're still working part-time, but we've also had some time to have space here to settle our family, to have time. Also because too, like we were here and we ended up quickly here because of kids getting into school and things, but having time and space to have God speak into what we're about to do. And have margin. Like we've been in ministry for 20 years in different capacities, and it's been full on pretty well that whole time. And so just having margin and being okay with that, that's been really hard to go, I'm in a different rhythm now, and to just be all right with that, because I'm used to the ministry speed, the ministry we've got to do now. We've got to get this, we've got to. And so actually going, okay, we don't have to have this church with 100 people in it next week, or we don't have to have this church looking like this. Actually, God, what are you saying, and what are you doing in us right now, and working on ourselves right now as well. And so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it's a massive tension. And I would just say to anyone, just if you're walking into this journey, try and create that margin. And Sarah summarized it really well. We've got a gift right now to have some headspace and some God space to be able to think about this next season of walking into that. So.
But also put people in your world that can speak in those moments where you really are struggling, not neglecting those quiet times that you take with the Lord, but having great people speak in where you go, just having a day, can we just chat? And they go, absolutely. And while they may not be able to fully appreciate where you are, just having a listening ear and someone that can pray and encourage actually makes all the difference.
It's so true, guys. It's so much of the unsaid journey of church planting, those highs and lows. And as you say, like that gift to actually go, God, what do you want to do in me before you even want to do for other people? Like,
absolutely,
it's almost like reclaiming the heart of God for whatever ministry we may be leading. So I thank you guys today for speaking into that. You guys also said something else before that I found really interesting. And I'd love to hear your take on this and just expound a little bit. You kind of talked about this idea of, and of course, we know the significance of a Sunday gathering, how important it is for the life of the church by way of personal discipline and community and all the great things that the church does together in the world and in Australia. But talk to me about that idea of, not wanting to just plant a service, like not wanting for the church just to exist for an hour and a half on Sunday. It's so much more than that, particularly as you guys move into a new town. What tell us about that idea?
Yeah. So look, we love the gathering. We love, people coming together, the atmosphere, the worshiping, great music, preaching. Like we love that. And our whole life's been serving into that space. And I think if we look back at our ministry journey, the struggle's probably been more around working on culture in church, around discipleship, pastoral care for one another. It's easy to get people to an event. But I think to be honest, like if we look at particularly the Western church, and I'm generalizing, but usually it would be, hey, we'll invite you. So to our non-Christian, unsaved people that we might know, hey, come to us, come to our event, come to our thing. We almost expect, and I'm speaking to myself here, we sort of expect somehow that the person on the platform is going to make a decision or communicate something that our friend or the person that we know to come to a point of faith, and it's all going to be fixed by this magical thing that happens on a Sunday morning. And so just as we're journeying, well, what does a church look like? I think, particularly for me, it's like, hey, it's always been a struggle to build culture around strong discipleship and personal evangelism. So imagine if we could start from the beginning that this is just our culture. And so that's been a big conversation. So our rush isn't to get to a gathering for those reasons, but also, especially coming into a new community, last thing we want to do is draw people from other churches. Because we've been connecting really well with the local pastors here and made that a priority for them to know our heart. We don't want to
champion what they're already doing here.
We're about the kingdom. Hey, let's be people that see people that are unsaved come to know Jesus and have their life transformed. And so we know that starts with us. And so for us, we want to get to the gathering at the right point, but also we want to start with us. So, we're looking into things around like building discipleship communities with Crossway and those guys, and some other stuff with like My Friends and, other programs, and learning in ourselves. Because if I'm to be honest, I haven't got a backlog of all these people that I've brought to faith because of one-on-one conversations. It's been again through that thing of, well, hey, come to our event. And so how could we build a culture that as people start to join us and hear our heart, it's like, well, hey, the barber that I met who's, and this is a true story. The other day I was getting my hair cut. I was talking to the young guy that's a barber, wants to start a business. In doing that, I just shared what I'm doing, and he might connect with me about business development, which is a bit of background I've got. So then maybe I can get to a point where going, hey, would you read the Bible with me? And I've got to start myself in doing that first. And so I guess that's really our heart. And it's been interesting journeying that, because there's outside, and I'd say to people today on the church planning journey, there's probably mindsets from a lot of people that planning a church is getting to that Sunday gathering. And also then kind of not having or trying to process the external pressure from others to sort of head that direction, I guess, as the first priority.
Yeah. And even as we love people, that we don't do it with an agenda. I kind of touched on, I had a beauty appointment, and it went into this amazing conversation around faith that it literally came from, oh, what do you do? And, I said, oh, I'm a church pastor. And so she just opened up in this conversation, and I allowed her to be able to take it where it needed to go and just listen and love and care. And so who knows down the track, some of us are to plant seeds, others of us are to water, but it's God that brings the harvest. And I guess for us to see people come into relationship with Jesus, to get to know him, to have a transformation in their hearts, understanding that they need a savior. And then once they've done that they're discipled for the long haul, that then they're having conversations with their friends and their community, that they can then see people come to Christ that are then discipled, that go out and do it. And it's a real multiplication effect from that. Yeah, it starts small, one person, and that's what I'm believing for right now, God, that there would just be one person that, I can pray for and maybe read the Bible with and allow the Holy Spirit to do what he does best, but that I play my part in that I love well and care for them and nurture them and just be a good friend and a good person.
I think it's playing that it's the long game though too, like it's, and we're obviously right in it, just starting. We what do we know? But this is our heart. But I would say anecdotally and in theory that it's the long game, because it's like we could do a whole bunch of online promotion. Hey, we're going to run a service and get the numbers in the room and get the vibe. But actually approaching it from a discipleship perspective is going to take longer and be slower. And for our personalities, probably be more frustrating because we like momentum and strategy. But I guess we're trying to really look now at, okay, what does that strategy look like around that culture formation of, hey, we can do it at our level as we start to connect and build a team and, whatever that looks like. Hey, this is just part of who we are and what we do. And I guess looking 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the track and going, that's where I see this, this is who we are. And it's just second nature to the group of people that we've gathered and that sort of thing. And I guess the other factor too is we're really aware that there's loads of people that have walked away from church and even their faith. And so there's something in me as well there's a drawing to, as we gather a community of people together here to plant a church, there's a whole bunch of people, and we've met someone already that's like, and we don't know their whole story, but we're in church for 10 years and they haven't shared why, but they've now not going anywhere. And there's something obviously happened in their life to question their faith. Hey, through whatever we're doing, is there some way that we can help in their restoration back to Christ and back to the church as a community? And I don't know, we'll try.
That's so good. Hey, and I just wanted to publicly affirm you guys that you do know. You are walking the walk and you're talking the talk. And our big heart at Exponential Australia is to make heroes of church planters, because we truly believe that you guys are working it out, asking the Lord to do a new thing in and through your ministry. And so I really just did want to bring attention to that today, to go, you guys are doing an amazing job. We're so thankful that you would join us today. And we so appreciate the time that you've taken to share even your journey and the kind of glimmers of wisdom that are already beginning to emerge as you guys are doing that. So thank you so much for sharing today, guys.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
The opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bless you heaps.
Thanks for listening. For more great resources, please head to our website at exponential.org.au.